I'm Michele Weldon. I'm so happy to share a story that is powerful and personal and that I really hope helps shed some of the stigma that is around those of us who have suffered through intimate partner violence. I didn't date great people through high school and even had 2 marriage proposals before I ended up with the man I ultimately married. I was conscious of who he was. We went to the same high school, and then we started dating when I was 25. And he then moved to Dallas after a year of dating when I got a job there. Everybody thought he was the perfect partner because he presents so well and he's so upbeat and he was absolutely adoring. And my parents were real pleased because it was the son of a good friend of theirs, so they knew his background and his siblings and his parents and, everything about them. So there was a hint on the wedding day, and I was freaked out. We got married, we're in the church, I have all my bridesmaids, my sisters, a few of his sisters. We were declared married by the priest. We turn around to face, the friends and family who are all applauding. And he holds his hand in the air in a fist, like, I won. It was so bizarre. And I'm pulling on his arm, like, put your arm down. Put your arm down. And everybody, my sisters were like, that was the weirdest thing I ever saw. And then we got into the limo with 2 of my girlfriends that were bridesmaids. And they're like, why did you do that weird thing? He's like, I don't know. I was just, really happy. But it was like, now I have control of her. In the first few months, we're okay. So 4 months after we were married, on Christmas Eve, we had gotten home from a party and he slapped me. I don't even know what the argument was about. It was, minor. And I was absolutely astounded. I just could not believe that just happened. And then it began a pattern of, profuse apologies. And we saw a therapist after that and all through our marriage, and he was such a different person in the therapist as he was in between episodes, and episodes were about once a year. So I always felt like, oh, I'm taking care of this, and I dared not tell anyone in my family because I knew that my brothers would drive down and tell him to move out. And I knew my parents would be just so upset and, take action for me. So I didn't dare tell them. I didn't dare tell any of my friends because I was absolutely cloaked in shame. But then again, the duration in between was filled with, he was also still really controlling, but it was never physically violent. And he would do things like, I was a columnist and did a lot of public speaking, and I was in charge of parades in different cities, and I was, I had a public face. And I remember I came back, I had given a keynote at an event and he was there, and I came back, the crowd is cheering. It's like a couple of hundred people. And I go back and sit down. I'm really elated. And he says, you spoke too fast. Little digs all the time. The episodes consisted of 1 strike, and then he would always say it was a mistake. So what I learned later, of course, I read so much about this later. He would grab me so hard on the arm, and there'd be bruises on the arm, or he would slap me on the chest so hard. And then when I understand, certainly he wasn't professing this, but after they feel that they really have you, they initially bruise you and harm you on places that you can cover up. When they feel incredibly empowered and in control of you, they go for your face. So in the ending months of our relationship, before I got an order of protection, the final time, he had punched me in the face and left a huge bruise. And another time the last time he grabbed my mouth and squeezed it so hard that I had blood marks all over the inside of my mouth, and I couldn't really talk well because my mouth was so swollen. Looking at it in retrospect, all these years later, I feel that, why didn't I see that? But I just couldn't. I was overcome by the possibility of fixing it because, by the end we had 3 children. And in that last episode that happened at his parents' summer house in Wisconsin, when his parents were home and they saw, I screamed and they came into the room, and my 4-year-old son later that night said, "Did Daddy hit you?" And I was so stunned because he never did anything to me in front of them. But of course they knew what was going on, even at 4. So I was like, this is over with. And his mother said to me, "What did you do to make him mad?" And I thought, well, if that isn't the worst question in the world, I just was like, I need to get out of here. Then I went into the room where the boys were, because we were in a different room. So my 3 sons were all in a room with bunk beds. And I slept in there, and I put a dresser in front of the door so he wouldn't come in. And I was planning what I was going to do. And I even was so aware of what needed to happen that I thought, well, I'm in Wisconsin right now. If I file a police report here, I'm going to have to come back here. And it was an hour and a half away from our home in Chicago. And, thankfully my sister is a lawyer. She was a partner in a law firm that was medical malpractice defense. So she wasn't family law, but she certainly knew the law. I'm like, I'm going to go home and tell my sister. And this was the 4th of July weekend. And the night that he did it was, July 3rd. So I plotted out what I was going to do. I thought, I'm just packing up the boys in the morning and leaving. And, he can get home on the train if he wants, but I'm going to have a plan. And I, came out of the room with the boys. We were all packed and, had some breakfast and were ready to go. And his father said, "I will drive you back in my car, and then he can take the car and meet you at home." I was like, he cannot take the car. I'm leaving now. It was a lot. And then when I got home, my sister, there was a family party for the 4th, and I went and I told. And my sister Madeline said, we can, Monday, we can start to take care of this and get an emergency order of protection. So she had her law partner. He took my deposition. And when I talk about the episodes, I was really unaware of how many there were until he asked me. He was like, "Okay, is that it?" And I'd say no. On January 5th of what year, I had them all cataloged in my head of when, and I even surprised myself. So there were 14 incidents, and I knew the date. I knew what happened. I knew where it was. I have since forgotten some of the specifics, but I sure didn't then, because it was all waiting to come out and waiting for the truth to be revealed about him, and just to stop living this odd fantasy that everybody thought we were the perfect family, and he was just so marvelous, and I just couldn't stand it anymore. And the thing that was ironic about not telling the truth for so long was that, I was a newspaper columnist, and I had a personal column, and I wrote about my sons and my life. I never wrote about him because I didn't want to write about him. But when I came out with the truth, I wrote a book about it. I came out with that. People were shocked, except my neighbor who lived behind us. I didn't tell her explicitly, but she said, she would be over, and she had 2 children. And I had 3, and they were about around the same ages, and we'd always play together in the family room. And he worked all the time. And she said, when the garage door went up and he was coming home, she said, your whole family changed. Everybody went from, laughing and giggling and, maybe we were all having dinner together. She said it stopped when the garage door went up. I didn't feel that he was lethal. I thought he was really dangerous. I didn't fear for my life until the last time, that was in his parents' house, he said, please, God, let me kill her. So he elucidated it. He pronounced it. It was a declaration. He was asking God for permission. It's like, there's no choice here anymore. There is no forgiving this person. This was, on the weekend. I don't know. It was like a Saturday. I don't remember, which day was the 4th of July. But that week, like that Tuesday or Wednesday, we had been in the marriage counselors. And every week the counselor would say, rate your marriage, A through F. And he said, B+. So as he's saying this, praying for permission to kill me, I'm like, this was a B+. What if it was a B-? And then it just became so abundantly clear to me. It was, there's no apology. There are no flowers for this. There's nothing for this. I'm saving myself and my sons. And that was it. I got home and told, and it changed. I do believe my family wondered about him. I knew that my sisters didn't like him, thought he was too many accolades coming from him. Like, he would give toasts at parties to the best woman in the world. And I would, not even be looking in his direction. So they're like, well, that's weird. She doesn't even acknowledge when he's going, overboard, telling the world that you are the best woman ever and the best wife and mother, and you don't even respond. So they know me well enough to know that something was wrong. And, the times that when he went for my face and I did have bruising, then I blamed it on my sons. I said, threw a toy train when we were playing. He didn't mean it. He's sorry. And I'd say, I didn't throw a toy train. And I would say, oh, honey, you forgot. I just ducked and was putting things away. It's not your fault. And yeah, I think intuitively my sisters knew something was amiss just because it was over the top. It was performative adoration, and they're authentic, and everyone in my family is authentic. And, then after that, my brothers were like, yeah, I never liked him. I was like, well, thanks for telling me. For different reasons, they thought he didn't pitch in at all at home. And, both of my brothers were, happily married and working and had children and definitely helped at home and understood that it was their job. And he knew from me, both of my brothers knew from me that he didn't help at all around the house. I mean, was even, 6-7 months old before he changed one single diaper. So I would say that, to my brothers, and they'd be like, do you want me to talk to him? I'm like, no, please don't. And yeah, it was, I think intuitively my family knew. My father passed away before my first son was born, but my mother was around, and she was so upset because she was friends for life with his parents, and it caused a real rift in the group. Though his parents had to acknowledge it because they were there. They were witness to the last incident. And my mother wouldn't go to some events with the group because his parents were there, and she just couldn't believe that their son would do that to me. And one of my mothers even said to me after, I came out with the truth, she said, I always thought you had self-esteem. And I was like, of course I have self-esteem. And that's a myth that you invite it, you encourage it, you don't feel good about yourself. So of course, just let him do whatever he wants to me. I'm like, this happens to 1 in 3 women, and powerful women, women who are the heads of companies, women who are famous chefs, women who, run the world. And it isn't about self-esteem, and it is about stigma though. But I thought that comment was so telling. And it was, a good friend of my mother's who knew me and loved me. And it was like, oh boy, if I can do anything in my life as a public voice, I really want it to be to shed some of the shame, because that is important, because I sure was neck deep in it for 10 years. And I know that so many millions of women and men as well are drowning in it. As a writer and a journalist, I knew that I needed to take back control of the narrative. So after he left our home 10 years later in 1996, I felt really safe and I was given sole custody. And though he was a litigating attorney in a very large, successful law firm in Chicago, he was not allowed visits for all three children at once because we were both examined by a psychiatrist. I got sole custody and he can only have one at a time at someone's home. He couldn't be alone with the children. So it's like the world recognized what I didn't. And so visitation was always bizarre. He would be 3 hours late or just cancel completely. And then one time he brought the police to the door and said he just wanted to ensure that I was going to give a son over to him. And then, then I went to court to say, you can't bring police to the door. And he was told he can't bring police to the door. So it was always fraught with conflict. And then after a while, he got married within a year of our divorce. And he had a child, he had a daughter with this woman very quickly, and they were divorced within 2 years. So, there was a lot going on with him that I didn't know, and it was abandonment for my sons that, I'm sorry that this relationship he and I had turned into such hurt for them, and that abandonment is still an issue, and they are all in their 30s. So about 2 years after he was divorced, and he was always in a relationship with another woman, he told the boys he was supposed to have dinner with them, and he came to the house, and I wasn't home because he took all three of them to dinner, and he told them he was moving to Europe indefinitely because he thought his life was much bigger than the boys' homework or wrestling tournaments or, birthday parties or anything to do with it. It was so incredibly aggressively hurtful. That was outrageous, but I thought, oh no, he's like completely gone from their lives. And then I was like, oh, he's completely gone from their lives. And they then did not see him for about 12 years, almost 15 years. And, I wrote about that, and I've written 7 books so far. And my 5th book was called Escape Points, was about that abandonment and, dealing with all of that. And it actually, sometimes, and I've written, columns about this as well, sometimes fatherless is an improvement if what they do have is a real loving support system. So that is, ideally it's a 2-parent family, but when one is toxic and noxious, you're better off not having the poison. I thought, oh my gosh, no more hypercritical remarks, no more. It's like I can do what I want. I can, not worry like, oh, I have to get home, I can't leave them with the kids too long, or oh my gosh, it was a relief. It just was really expensive because if I wanted to go to the grocery store by myself, I had to hire a sitter. So that was, the downside. Even before he left for Europe, he was supposed to watch my sons when I was on a business trip, and I was flying out later that day, and he called that day to say he couldn't take the kids. So I called his parents. And I said, he's done it again, and you gotta, because I have to go to this. I'm, delivering a panel at this conference. So that was a lot. And I felt free, and I didn't feel like any of it was my fault. A funny thing is that I wasn't glad I stayed 10 years. I was certainly glad I had 3 gorgeous, beautiful, healthy boys, and part of that is from him. He's highly athletic. I am not at all. So my boys were all athletic and got his intelligence and my intelligence as well. So there are positive things. And then I thought, I'm glad I tried so hard to fix it. And it didn't work because it's really hard being a single parent. And I was like, no, I tried. I gave it absolutely everything. He cannot be fixed. He has to fix himself. So it is the best choice that I made was to have him removed from our house and to divorce him. Although he filed for divorce like immediately after the order of protection. And that was another aggressive move because I was thinking, 3 months and then he would get help. I said, I will give you a year, you go get help, to how to stop this behavior. And no, because he already had his plan B in that I had no idea about. So that was interesting. And what's very interesting is now, we are 26 years past this, and he sends letters to the house, my house, three letters to the boys at this address because he has no idea where they live, and one to me every month. And mine says, I love you very much. I want to be a part of your life. We had so many great times together. And it's bizarre. It's also in this handwriting that I would love to get evaluated. And it's, I love you. I want to know what's going on. And then he says, I drive by your house and I see your decorations. They look so good. And I was like, oh, this is creepy. And I had been ripping up the letters and throwing them out. And my sister said, keep those letters because it's something called monitoring. He's not threatening me, but yeah, it is creepy that he still writes me letters, and he writes the boys, and the boys' letters are weird and going back to like, one he sent was, I remember the day you were born, it was so peaceful. I'm like, peaceful? I was screaming. He doesn't remember right. It was like, I used to call you, and then nicknames like he was the perfect father. He was like never home. So it's the rewrite of history is so interesting. But in my line of work, as someone who has a public voice and who tells the truth, I think he's more afraid of me doing that, telling the truth about him, because I will, and I have. And that could wipe him out. So certainly as an attorney, he got fired from that really great law firm after a bit, but that didn't have anything to do with me. But yeah, he did something there. So anyway, I feel as if the power of truth telling is not just cathartic and healing for me, and to reframe it where I took control over what I had no control over, and I took control of the healing part of the story, and I'm not afraid of him at all.